All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Mindful SRNA RRNA podcast. I am beyond excited. I have my very first podcast guest, Cliff Charles, CRNA. We met in, went back through our text messages. We met in September of 2020. I had just done, I think, a summit with a bunch of CRNAs, and you popped on the summit, and I believe you won the prize getting like a free session with me. I just started my mentoring business at the time. And so Cliff and I met for a quick 30-minute session, and he was in the middle of CRNA school in Puerto Rico. And we actually did an entire live talking about him going to school in Puerto Rico, some other things. So be sure to check that out. I will drop that link in the show notes. And we chatted, and ever since 2020, me and him had just kept in touch. So finally, fast forward November of 2021. So a year after our initial contact, he had said to me, he texted me and he was like, you know what? I'm in the final countdown. I'm almost done with school. I'll reach out to you in a little bit. Perfect. 7 months later, I hear from him, right? And I'm like expecting he's like, I'm a CRNA now, this, that, and the other thing. But he basically told me what was going on. He had kind of taken a break, stepped away from everything. And he had said, I need to finish what I started. Plus, I want to be on the other side and start doing what you're doing. And the market is in need of CRNAs, and I need to get back into it. And I said, fantastic, great. So that was in May. So then 6 months more passed or so. It was like October. So October 27th, 2022, after we initially started talking in 2020, he literally texted me, please pray for my success in passing boards. So I sent him a prayer. And then the next day, he sent me a bunch of pics and said, introducing Cliff Charles, CRNA. So essentially, you were in CRNA school in 2020. You graduated in 2021. But you didn't pass boards until 2022. And then you just started when did you start your first job?
About mid 2022.
About mid 2022.
Yeah, summertime.
So it was about a year lapse before you started your job. Is that correct?
Just about.
Just about. Okay. So I know you guys are super intrigued because everyone's like, oh my God, I haven't given anesthesia. I graduated. It's been 3 months. Guys, it was about a year. So we are going to dive into that. So I know you are super intrigued. Cliff has so much amazing things to share. We're going to ask him, pick his brain today, get all the gems from him, what he did, what his story looks like. And I am just really, really, really excited to have you here, Cliff. So welcome. So all my listeners, I know they want to know all your stats. So why don't you give us a quick overview? Where did you work at as a nurse? How long were you a nurse for? And how many schools did you apply to? CRNA schools.
So I've been a nurse since 2008, right? Basically, after that first job that I took, I worked in a community hospital. It was a med-surg telemetry setting. So basically, it was take care of a lot of medical patients. A lot of the private docs would have their patients come to this facility. And I worked overnights. I basically learned the trade, learned the base, kind of got my foundation and really built from there. And about 2.5 years after that, I went into a critical care fellowship, which was a year-long training program, which basically it was rigorous. They taught you everything about critical care nursing, the comprehensive, the whole lifespan of critical care nursing, right? And like I tell a lot of people in that cohort, I believe it was one of the it was either first or second. I believe it was the second cohort of that particular facility, or not facility, but organization. And in that cohort, a large number of people in that cohort are currently CRNAs. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, it basically says a lot about the level of nurses that came from that training.
Yeah.
But in that fellowship, we learned about basically how to care for different populations. Anyway, from there, I basically took a role in the CTICU setting. All right, so it was a CTICU in a hospital in New York City. I basically learned that part of the trade, that specialty. It was very difficult for me. I had to learn a lot about myself. I had to learn a lot about like how to deal with a lot of different emotional intelligence things. I learned just basically how to deal with certain personalities. That was some of the hardest days were during that time. Some of the hardest days in my nursing career were during that particular time.
Yeah,
Not
I
to
can
say that
imagine.
now it has, I still have hard days nowadays, but I feel that those are the first encounters with certain scenarios, certain challenges, certain frustrations.
Mhm.
That's where most of them really started. That's when the first time I really was encountering things that I just couldn't imagine when I was in nursing school.
Yeah, and it built your foundation. So you did med surg telemetry.
Yes,
So, and then you did cardiothoracic, CTIC, whatever you want to call it. So cardiac thoracic ICU. How long
correct.
were you there for?
Like I said, it's about 5 years time
About 5 years.
before I really, really got knee deep into the application process.
How
So
many?
by 20,
Go ahead.
good.
No, go ahead. Go
So it sounds like you're going to ask me how many schools did I apply to,
ahead.
right?
Yes.
So I applied to 4 in total.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how many did you get into?
And I got into all 4 of the schools.
Perfect. And then you
Yeah.
ended up in Puerto Rico, though,
And I
correct?
ended up in Puerto Rico. I ended up in the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico.
Perfect. So what was your, so you were about what, 7 years as a nurse before applying to CRNA school?
I would say so. 2000, yeah, that's 6 years. Yeah,
About
if
6
you
years.
do
Okay.
take mental math, right?
Right, right. You got to be good at that, guys, in
I
anesthesia.
know,
It's a
I
skill. I'm
know,
not,
it's a skill,
it's a skill that takes
but
time. I was not something that comes naturally to me at all.
yeah, it's like
Um,
0.15 of Duromorph in your injection, this and
yep,
that.
yep,
100 milligrams of sucks, how many cc's, so on
yep.
and so forth.
Oh yeah.
Making a bag of neosinephrine and so on and so forth. So
Yes,
yeah,
we are bartenders with drugs.
it's funny. I used that bartending line last night in that emergency case I had. I was
I,
telling the patient in pre-op, I was like, yeah, we're like the best bartenders.
we are.
Yeah.
We are. I love that.
So
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's essentially like what we're doing. Um, so what was your GPA?
I was a 3.5
Okay, before you applied
cumulative.
to cumulative 3.5, did you retake any science classes or take the GRE at all?
I didn't have to retake any science courses. For the Puerto Rico program at the time, the GRE was required. I'm not sure if it still is, but they don't have a specific number. I think they just want to see what your score is and kind of judge it based on the entirety of your package. So, like I always tell people, when you're applying for these programs, it's really the package that the faculty is looking at. They're not looking at one particular thing. So I just push myself in every aspect of my application and just gave it my best shot.
I love it. What was kind of your, I know you said references. You went above and beyond with references. Talk to me about that as far as your application package goes.
So most of the schools were asking for 2, maybe 3 references, but I made sure to get at least 4 or 5 for most programs I was applying to. And I picked certain people. These are people that I believe that had my best interest in mind, that had the same vision. And said, you know what, I see you doing that. I could see you being a CRNA. You just have certain skills, certain qualities that would fit for that. You're young, you're ambitious, you really want this. So, we're willing to help you with that process. You know what I mean? Like the thing is, that's one thing that you always have to be mindful of in your entirety of any career that you do. If you're going to be working full time, you got to definitely think about who are your go tos for references down the road. And so that means how you conduct yourself throughout your practice, how you conduct yourself in life, in your professional life.
Yes. And that's why, like, my number one thing is excellent nurses make excellent CRNAs. And you, like, it all starts from the beginning. It started in nursing school and then med surg telemetry. And I had a whole episode about it doesn't matter where you start, who are you becoming? Because all all the things that you pick up on your way to CRNA all count. And I'm sure you can probably account to that now that you're out working as a CRNA now.
Yeah, I would say this too. I would say, you just triggered me about because you just mentioned nursing school, and I have to remember your audience is everybody. It's not just people who are ICU nurses. Your audience is people who are in high school. So yes, that means that we're even in high school. You got to consider the kind of courses you're taking. That if you're in advanced math courses, advanced science courses, AP courses in your high
Yeah.
school, you want to have stellar grades so that when you go into nursing school or apply to nursing school or apply to a pre-nursing program, pre-nursing, you definitely have the what it takes because that's going to carry you throughout your whole life. So
Yeah.
that triggers me to say that all the way back to the beginning when I'm in high school, I'm looking at certain courses, making sure that all my grades are good.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to consider, is that your math and your sciences are good even from back then.
Yeah.
You
And I
know, so
love
that
that because I had a lot of fun in high school, and I didn't take things so seriously, you know what I mean? And then finally, I think my junior, senior year, I got it together and was able to get into nursing school. But yeah, no matter where you're at on the journey, and even if you're like, oh my gosh, I had horrible grades in college, I had horrible grades in high school, just know you can still, I know life happens, things happen, you can still turn that around. And there's plenty of other ways, there's plenty of taking science courses in the GRE. There's other things you can do to do that. But for those of you, listening, the goal is really to be excellent and utilize your full potential no matter where you're at, no matter what unit you work in, because it does all really count towards becoming a CRNA and getting into school and through school. With that being said, do you have any other things you want to share about the application process to CRNA school?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in 2023, going into 2024, I highly recommend anyone who's serious about this to do a serious amount of shadowing and a serious amount of mentoring, because I get asked a lot of times off script, on the side, whatever, phone calls, people referring to me, and I'm realizing that you do have to have a level of seriousness in your application and in your package for many reasons. I think social media has blown up in the last decade. I mean, since I start, even when I can go back to when I was starting to apply, Instagram wasn't what it is today. A lot of features just didn't exist, and people were not as CRNAs were not as transparent about day in the life. They were not as transparent about just the whole process, And even the organizations and whatever else that I've looked at, including diversity CRNA and so on and so forth, what I've realized is that I've encountered a lot of people who just have more and more inside information as to what will make them stand out. So if more people are doing the same things to stand out, it makes it harder to stand out. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like, as a minimal, if you want to do the minimal, you have to shadow and you have to start seeking out mentors that have knowledge about not only nursing anesthesia but how to get in, and also people who are faculty members and people who have the ability to get you into these programs.
Yes. And that's like, I mean, we could literally do a whole episode on networking and building relationships. That is key. Like, it doesn't matter. Charge nurses, managers, nursing school professors, teachers that you encounter, everything. Like, it is, every relationship on the way is so crucial. So building relationships, and not talking to people, like making it about what you can get, but how can you add value? How can you add value to the charge nurse, to your nurse manager? How can you add value checking in with people? And really, like, half the jobs I get are just from simply literally building relationships. So that's a huge, I'm so glad you bring that up. And I think that's a huge key and something really big that we need to focus on, in kind of those of you that are looking to apply to CRNA schools. So let's recap. So med-surg telemetry, cardiothoracic, ICU nurse for about 5 years, applied to schools. GPA was 3.5. You did take your GRE. Am I not mistaken? You did end up taking your GRE. How'd you do
Yeah,
on it?
not good.
I didn't either. I
I
didn't
don't
do the
want. I
best on
don't
it
really
either.
want to talk about that.
I know, right? I didn't do well either. Did your
Yeah.
GRE, applied to 4 schools, got into all 4 schools, ended up in Puerto Rico. All right.
Yes.
So let's fast forward to school. Were you in a relationship when you were in CRNA school?
Yeah, absolutely. I was with my girlfriend, who's currently my wife now, and
Congratulations.
thank you very much. This was it was a long ride, but I'm happy we finally got to this point, so that now we can kind of like live our lives. Because we really weren't during that process. So let me get right into it.
Yeah.
Basically, when you and this is another part of why I stress the mentoring process, because there are two people right now I'm thinking about, and I'm sure you know who they are, who are being mentors, who just got into school, and they have families, or they're in relationships, and I'm telling them, I says, there needs to be a sit down, and I think the best scenario is to have a sit down with a mentor who had gone through this process, to talk as a third person about the experience in front of the spouse or the partner or whatever you want to designate that person and family, so they understand what they're about to encounter and what they're about to experience. Because I feel that if I say it, it's one thing, but if someone that's not familiar says it, a third party, that maybe the message will sink in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I love
You know,
that.
it's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation because there's a lot of uncharted territory. You're kind of going out into the water and you don't really know what's in that water. You're just out there. You know what I mean? You don't know where the shark's at. You don't know where anything's at. You're just out there. You just got the paddleboard and nothing. And maybe the paddleboard's not working, but you got to make it work because you want to get to the end, to the destination.
Yeah. How long were y'all together before you started the CRNA program?
Wow. See, I'm doing some mental math.
Yeah.
At least I would say about 9 years, 8, 9 years.
Okay, so you guys were together 8, 9 years. Your program
Serious long-term
was
relationship. Yeah. And
okay.
the program is about 3 years. Yeah.
And did she go to Puerto Rico with you?
No, we basically converted into like a long distance thing because we lived together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I would do the thing where I would go to school, come back, go and come back. And it was just a lot of expenses between traveling and so on and so forth, you know. And then we had to create a lot of reasons and activities to, to kind of keep the intimacy. And we also use technology to keep very frequent contact, texting, voicemail, conversation, FaceTime, and so on and so forth. Like all that technology, we used it as much as we can in all of the gaps of time, gaps of studying, clinical, and so forth to really, maintain our relationship.
And
But
how
it
long?
wasn't easy.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. My story's for another day, but like I was in a breakup and we got back together when I was in CRNA school and we like lived together and that was difficult. I mean, so I couldn't imagine.
Wow.
How often did you guys see each other? Like in person?
I would say every few months. I don't, I probably should have thought about it and wrote it down somewhere, but I would say every few months. You know what
Every
I
few
mean? I could
months.
probably go back and look at my airplane tickets and stuff, but it's a short pop. Chicago to Puerto Rico, New York to Puerto Rico. These are short trips.
Yep.
Direct flights.
Yeah.
Relatively affordable. Like they're not, I wouldn't say cheap, but they're affordable. Like it's pretty a fair price to get to and from.
So
So
talking
I
of
made
that,
every attempt. Sorry, I just want to say, I made every
yeah,
attempt
go.
to fly back every opportunity I had. Even though I want to say it wasn't easy, there were sometimes I don't think I was even supposed to make. I don't think I was supposed to make. I know. There were sometimes I
Doggies.
don't even think I was supposed to make that trip. So that's another thing. Like another thing about CRNA school, little secret is that you're kind of under someone else's watch and you have to conduct yourself in a way where it's like the priority is school, nothing else.
Mm, yeah. And how did you prepare her for that? Or did you even prepare her for how
I'm glad.
challenging this would be?
Well, she's a nurse as well, and a number of her colleagues pivoted out of working in the med surg arena into ICU and went on to become CRNAs or SRNAs and so on. But so she understood some of it, but she knew what I knew, you know what I mean? And she knew it secondhand for me. So in terms of like, sit downs and like long conversations, we had plenty of those conversations. She had to sit through a lot of that. She had to hear me talk about, going to these conferences preschool or going to interviews. We had a lot of lengthy conversations, deep conversations about a lot of things. We talked about finances. We spoke about even the living situation. We had a lot of these conversations, but ultimately, I ended up making my decision based on all the circumstances, based on what I wanted. I wanted to be a CRNA, and she was fully supportive with the idea, and she stuck around for it. And that's why I'm so thankful that everything worked out, because it's not something that everybody can easily do. There's so many big, tough pills to swallow. Those potassium pills, magnesium pills, those are the pills you're swallowing throughout this process.
Yeah. What would you say? So, if someone is in a relationship and they're starting CRNA school or thinking about it, or they're in CRNA school now with a significant other and they're struggling, what would be your best piece of advice for getting through that?
the best advice I would say is just both have to be very realistic and have a high level of honesty with each other about what you want. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people have a tendency to think that they know each other, but I would say I think every test was kind of teased out in this process with our relationship, and I think a lot of people, I would say, you really have to have tough conversations beforehand and go through a lot of things beforehand because this is really going to test you guys. This may be the final test, in my opinion.
Oh,
For a lot of people, I've witnessed a lot of people separate during this journey, and that's one of the ugly dark sides. I don't know how to express it any other way. Like that is one of the hardest things I think in this process is a lot of people separate because of this particular job. You know what I mean? A lot of, and again, I can go down a rabbit hole with this, but it definitely separates people. I think that's the best way to describe it. So have the tough conversations. That's my word to people. Have those tough conversations early on. Think about finances because that's a difficult conversation, whether you're doing this or anything in life, right? As a couple,
yep.
living arrangements, this or anything else as a couple. So those conversations should be had no matter what. But in this circumstance, it is so important that everything is at stake if things don't go the way people want it to go. So both of you have to want it really, really bad. And it has to, for it all to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the being realistic piece is key. And I will just say, do you think like the time that y'all spent doing the long distance while you were in CRNA school, now you're married, living together, you're working, do you feel like you have a stronger bond because of what you guys went through?
I do. I think it's a stronger bond, and there's a level of appreciation for our time now that I don't think we've ever had. I mean, not to say we never had it, but I verbalize it a lot now. Like, all weekend, every time, even the last time we spoke, I reflect and we reflect on the fact that we've come so far, like, and it
Yeah.
really means something to say. It's not some cliche, bullshit line. Oh, we come so far. We've been through
Yep.
so much. We've been through it all. One of the things about being newly married is like I'm still kind of going over that video of our wedding and thinking about how many ways that wedding ceremony could have been played out in terms of the speeches, how many speeches we had, and I think about it a lot. So many times you go to these receptions and people say so many cliche things, and you don't really know what people really go through.
Yeah.
And now I'm going through what we went through with this CRNA training process and everything that this did to me as a person and to her and to us and to all the people in my family who kind of witnessed it. I can truly say like the words all have meaning and there's something behind what we say, when we talk about, this experience. And I can't speak on any other experience, but I'm saying that, at the end of the day, when I say, we've been through some shit,
Yeah.
I really mean it. It's not like I'm
Yeah.
saying it just to say it.
Yeah.
People say it a lot, but I don't know what they mean. I know what it means in my situation. My wife knows what it means in this situation. We've
Yeah.
been through some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that is one thing is like, I've been married for I think 5 years now and two kids later and all the stuff, partridge in a pear tree. And I will say I still look back at that time in school and why it was horrendous and it was not fun to go through. Like that was me and him. You know what I mean? Like we were ride or die. We figured it out. And I really do now look back and appreciate it all. And it was, really ugly. So I'm glad to hear you kind of have that same experience as well. So let's start talking about what happened post CRNA school. All right. So talk to me about what happened after you graduated CRNA school.
Well, I mean, one of the issues again, there's a little bit of context to it. I need to give you part of that context so you can understand why all of this is going to make sense. So, our school in Inter-American, for multiple reasons, the most obvious reason is because of the language barrier. Our school has a very difficult time with the pass rate. We have a low pass rate. That's not a secret. This is something that our school has been working adamantly to work on and fix, right? And that's because a large, majority of our students at this program are Spanish speaking first, right? English is obviously another first language in Puerto Rico, but Spanish is the first language, right? So some people have a difficult time with the board exams. So our passing rate isn't as competitive as other schools around the country, right? So in order to combat that, the faculty puts such a very high benchmark for the C exam as an exit exam from the program, right? So that's important now. I don't know if any other programs necessarily have a specific number score for their exit from a program, but I knew when I got into that program, it was told on our first day that we had to sign a document stating that before we exit the program, we obtain a 450 on the C exam in order to sit for board and to be released from the program and graduate. If you can't meet that benchmark, you're not going to become a CRNA whatsoever.
Mm,
All right,
yep.
it's a hard line. It's a hard line. It's a high standard, and you have to meet it, or else you're not getting out.
Did you meet it?
Okay, and so for that reason, I struggled, I struggled, and I struggled. Right, and I had to do some deep diving, self reflection, and deal with some of the obvious stuff. I posted a video yesterday, and you can see clearly what I look like when I was in Puerto Rico. Right, I was another 150 pounds heavier, so I had to address my weight. So that time that I took off was to focus more on my weight because I feel like that was the major contributing issue and why I wasn't able to sit, focus, and successfully get that score. So I
Wow.
had to deal with my own self.
Wow.
Some
So,
people have to deal with mental health. I have to deal with my physical health.
yeah. And I like, guys, hear me loud and clear. Some people take 6 weeks off, a few months off, literally because of their mental health from CRNA school before they take boards. It is not unheard of. I know people think you have to, everyone, we hear the other stories. Graduate 2 weeks, you take boards, you pass, you work. That is not everybody's story. Okay. And it doesn't have to be your story as well. So I love that he said, I think I could do better. I'm not showing up as my best self right now. I think this is a deterrent. I'm going to address that first. And I think that's really big of you. And I think that's like incredible. So essentially, did you take the C first or after, or like when did the C kind of come into play?
No, to be, very transparent, I had to take it multiple times because I wasn't successful. You understand what I'm
So
saying?
then that led you to, so that was kind of like, okay, I need to address my health. This isn't
Yes.
going well. Something has to change. And guys, notice he looked within himself, right? He
Yes.
looked within himself. He didn't go on a shiny squirrel hunt and trying to find better strategies and that, but he said, I need to change something about me. So you go on this fitness journey, right? You go on this weight loss journey. You look absolutely incredible, by the way. And I bodybuild, but even any type of weight loss, anything like that takes immense, immense mental capacity, as does CRNA school. So you're doing this journey, you're done with school. Where's your relationship at this point? And are you working? Because I know you probably don't have much money at this point at the end of CRNA school.
That is part of it. Obviously we're like in the heat, like the full heat of the pandemic. So of course, I took advantage of that as well. So I did the travel thing. I definitely jumped on the big COVID contracts as well. It just was a means to an end. Like I needed to take care of some of my bills. Some of those bills are starting to pile up. You don't work for a while. You're in school for 3 years, and you put everything on pause. Everything's on moratorium, and so on and so forth, but those things are going to end. And some things aren't on moratorium. Your credit card bills are not. You still got to put gas in your car. You still got to drive. And that student loan money is only so much. You know what I'm saying? And life
Yep.
must go on in general, not just this whole CRNA thing is kind of a little bit of a torture. This idea that you're already a professional nurse, now you got to step down, revert, and then become like a student again. You go from being like 40 years old to like 15 again. It's an interesting dynamic. You have to kind of put yourself in that mindset. And I keep saying this, and this is something I'm going to keep saying for the people who are applying who are like 35 and older. That's a big consideration. I saw a lot of people struggle big time with that, having to revert back to a stage where they have to listen to people have to direct them, and they have to take a lot of orders from people and to kind of go wherever the wind blowed that day. If you're John Preceptor, you have to kind of follow John. You have to do it John's way.
Yeah.
John's way is the best way today. or else that eval is gonna suck.
Yeah.
You understand? And you have to remember that. You have to remember John's way 3 weeks from now when you were John again. Because if you go do Sammy's way with John, that might not work for you. So
Yep.
anyway, that's a short soapbox on that. So
Yeah.
going back to the main reason why we got to that point. So you're asking me about that exam and passing the C exam and then
Yep.
that time off and then the money, right? So yeah,
Yep.
I had to do that. Had to make money,
Because you travel
and
nursed. You did
yeah, I
COVID
did travel
contracts.
nurse.
Yep, you did COVID
Yes,
contracts. You're doing your weight loss journey. Your relationship
yes,
is continuing on. You guys weren't living together, right? You were traveling.
yeah. So I was back and forth. It was it was basically the same
Same
exact thing
thing.
as Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When did you finally know you were ready to take boards? Because you texted me
It
27th of
was
October.
there came a point where I lost a significant amount of weight. I reached I hit a certain nerve and a certain stride. Sorry, not nerve, a stride in my studying patterns, and then the way that the knowledge was sitting in my head, and the way I can deal with practice questions, deal with the review questions, and seeing like the patterns and seeing the routine. Okay, now I see like the connection between all of the anesthesia content and what the board writers are looking for. After a while, there's only certain ways they're going to ask questions about malignant hypothermia and certain questions about certain concepts. And you start to see patterns they want you to be safe. They want you to be focused on the safety of being a provider. They want you to be the kind of person who's conscious about certain things. So as you're looking at questions, as you're looking at the material, you start realizing, okay, this is what they want. Because every time you encounter the rationale, every time you encounter these questions, you're like, oh, okay, now I see what they want. So I got to that point after all of that time. After wrestling with the material, I said to myself, now I see the patterns, now I see what they want. It's time to close this deal.
Wow. So you just kind of you knew it was time. How long did you study for? Like when did you start? Did you take any like time off, between studying, between finishing school? Like how long did you really study for consecutively?
I would say it took me about a solid year, but I would say the real core, like when I really like figured out the whole trick and everything, I really think the last 3 to 6 months were like the best times. That's when I really had everything figured out in terms of what music to play when I was studying, how often to look at my phone, how often to look at Instagram, if I should be looking at Instagram while I'm studying. So that was another part of it. So I went on not only was I on a diet for myself to eat, I was on a social media diet. I abstained from social media. I turned them off. I deleted them from all my devices. I deactivated social media for long periods of time. I would almost punish myself and say, you know what, I'm not going to be on Facebook for the next month. And I would just delete it, take it off of everything, and not look at it for a while. I would not entertain a lot of phone calls. There were certain people my wife would say, hey, Cliff, why are you talking to this person until midnight? And they're not helping you pass this test. You're just gossiping. You know what I'm saying? Like these were classmates or people who had just taken the C exam or bored, and intertwined with talking about concepts. It was bullshit. It was like, oh, we're talking about this, we're talking about that. She was like, you need to cut that out. Like, if you're gonna be on the phone with somebody, make it worth your time. You know what I mean? You're wasting a whole lot of time talking about nonsense. Like, why do you care about what's going on with everybody else? Worry about passing this effing test
Yeah.
and stay focused.
I love that you were like, I was dieting social, I was dieting gossipy conversations, I was dieting all these things, right? Like you were getting down to the core of what really matters. And then how exactly, because I know everyone's going to want to know, what did you use to study? Like what was kind of, or Apex, Prodigy, Valley? Was it a mix? Like what was actual like your study plan?
So the study plan, like the study plan that really worked, right? And a lot of people probably heard of it now because Apex has a document that describes the Pomodoro technique,
Yep.
where it's like hyper focus for about 25 minutes or 45 minutes, hyper focus for 25 minutes and a 5 minute rest, and then another 25 minutes and a 5 minute rest. That's in a 1 hour Pomodoro. Or half an hour Pomodoro. In a 1 hour Pomodoro, it's a 45-minute study, full focus study, and 15 minutes of no study. You just rest. You watch watch something light on TV, or you just eat something, or you just literally sit in peace and you think or pray or do whatever it is to detach yourself from the material and intensity for 15 minutes or 40-20. There's different ways to do the cut. I believe Pomodoro is a term, it's an Italian term meaning tomato. It's used by chefs when they're cooking. But supposedly there's something with the mind that when you do that technique, your brain can absorb the material and retain the material better. It's a more marathon way of studying. So I did that for about, I think, an honest 8 to 10 hours every day for that 3 to 6 month period.
Okay.
At that final lap.
Okay, perfect. And you say which program did you use?
Oh, Apex Anesthesia is the best. It's the most comprehensive. It's very extensive in terms of reading and understanding and looking at the concepts. And because the tutorials, especially right now, they have a lot of graphics, a lot of visuals that really help. So it's like when you're making a whiteboard and when you're trying to tease out the concepts and really look at the concept maps, that is the best program to use. I mean, there are other programs that are out there, but the other programs, I think they focus more on studying for the questions and knowing how to deal with the questions specifically. That's what some of the other programs I think are better for. I
Okay.
think Apex is the most comprehensive for both questions and how to deal with and how to study anesthesia and how to understand anesthesia. Because inside of the tutorial, there are little tidbits. In the rationales, there are tidbits to say, you know what, we asked the question this way, but you could have dealt with it that way. You could have looked at it this way. So I like how Apex's rationales really teach you how to look at anesthesia and how to look at the content so that you can be successful when you're thinking through the questions on the board exam.
I love that. I love that. So you did a mix of basically going through the material, wrestling with the material so you can understand it in a way that works for you. And then you did a bunch of practice questions. And then finally you were ready to take the boards. You knew it. I loved it. That was some good stuff there.
There's more. There's a little bit more to it. Like for example, there's something else I think a lot of people when you're studying that you have to be mindful of. Don't be afraid to be a little bit repetitive and a little bit obsessed about things, even though you don't want to be like to the point where you're spending 4 days on a concept. That's a waste of time because you really have to think of a comprehensive look at everything. So there are tricks I did to kind of memorize things. Like every day I had to look at the physics laws. Every day I had to look at things that had to be memorized, like small bits of information. I put on a lot of index cards. Again, index cards is a controversial topic. Not everyone does well with a lot of index cards. Some people say to minimize the amount that you produce because if you get caught up in producing so many index cards, that becomes another problem too. If you have 30,000 index cards, you're never going to get through all of them. So that's another conversation too.
Yeah.
We can spend time on that, but
I know I'm
again,
like any of these topics we could talk for days on, but you're literally all
yeah.
these little nuggets I know are helping people tremendously. All right, so let's switch gears again. So finally, you passed your boards, you did it. You are in probably what the best health, the best shape of probably your life, your adult life, I'm assuming. Um, then how did you transition? So you hadn't touched a patient in an anesthesia setting. You were a travel nurse, but you hadn't touched a patient as an anesthetist for over a year. How did you
Mhm.
transition into your first job?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to say this as a disclaimer. I don't necessarily recommend it. It's just my reality. It was my circumstance. It's not something that I went out of my way to do. Many programs try to get their students to, close the deal, get credentialed, and get working pretty much immediately out of school. The whole point is to be prepared, a full service provider by the time you get out. So I'll say that it kind of hurt me a little bit, and now I'm kind of making up for that lost time. So I don't necessarily believe that my path is the best path. It's just my path. It just is my reality. So I'm just saying that to say, like, right now I'm hustling and I'm pushing myself. Again, I'm going back to that mindset. Like, I got to push myself. I've got to be a top tier professional and I have to maintain my knowledge and I have to go back and read and go back and, say, you know what? I don't know this stuff. I have to go back and look it up again and go over it again and build up my confidence again because I lost a lot of those tactile skills. in that large gap. I don't recommend it, and it's not something, if I had a choice, I would not do it.
Well, talk to me about, I know we discussed that you had a emergency patient situation. So talk to me about being a new grad and how did you manage that situation?
Okay, so yeah, so what we privately talked about how you pretty much kind of have be keep in the back of your mind that as a CRNA you will be hitting the ground running. Another thing that I think is kind of misunderstood is this concept of that you're working with physicians and that they're somehow going to be holding your hand and telling you every little thing that you got to do while you're working. And that is another reality that you have to keep in mind, that no, that you have to be in the mindset that you have to take accountability for all of your actions and all of your critical, in the moment decisions that you make as a CRNA. Like, you cannot say to yourself, oh, I'm a CRNA, but oh, I have a doc, so everything's going to fall on them. That's not true. Everybody in anesthesia is a full professional, and everyone must have that level of accountability on their side. Like, you have to walk in with the mindset that you are fully responsible for every last thing that happens to that patient. And yes, document wise, on paper, you may be in a situation where, yes, a physician may be supervising you or medically directing you, but you have to have the mindset that no matter what it says on paper, you're responsible for that patient.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that so much. And what would you tell people about, like, in school? Like, what is the dangers of trying to be perfect in school? And what do you think about, like, understanding foundational concepts? Like, what do you really need to be focusing on when you're in clinical and you're in school?
Okay, I'm going to answer your other question and this question kind of at the same
I was
time,
going to say they kind of
because
go together.
again, they do go together.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, you said to be a great CRNA, you have to be a great nurse, right? I don't necessarily toot my horn and say, oh, I was a great nurse. I just say that I had a really tough time, a really difficult experience, which taught me a lot of things, which kind of hardened me and kind of whipped my ass to make me better at certain things and made me see certain things. Because as a nurse anesthetist, your experiences are going to be different than a physician's experience in their journey into becoming an anesthesiologist. And I say that to say that you may be hyper focused on so many little things because of that nursing background. Your multitasking skills are developed as a nurse already. A lot of your skills, that's why when you take charge, when you're looking at the big picture on a unit, on an intensive care unit, you're thinking about so many things. You're thinking about what's going to happen to this patient, what's going to happen to that patient. I got my two, and then so and so got their two, and who's the sickest on the floor right now, and what could happen, and if right now we have a code, how am I going to drop everything and help that other nurse deal with it? So all of those kind of thought processes that you have, managing not only your patient but managing the room and managing everything around you, that mindset and that thought process has to go through your mind as a student as you're about to be in full control of your patient when you become an anesthetist. You've got to be constantly thinking to yourself, there's a reason why I'm learning this drug calc, why I'm learning about succinylcholine, why I'm learning about atropine. There's a reason why I'm learning all this stuff. These things I need to know cold for the moment, the half second where I have to make a decision. So, fast forward to me several weeks ago, I'm a junior CRNA. I'm new to this job. I decided to push myself and go, okay, I'll take call. I'll be a call CRNA now. And of course, one of the first shifts in call, I'm with an experienced anesthesiologist, and they're telling me, hey, look, we got this case. It's an accreta, female accreta emergency. She's been bleeding for so and so long. It's this amount. We got to bring them in. They want to do this case. Let's do it. Blah blah blah. So of course, in the room is me, my attending, and a more experienced CRNA who was wonderful, who helped me along the way. But I'm telling you, on the inside, it was incredibly terrifying. Why is it terrifying? Because when you're looking at theory, especially for me, obstetric was not my strong point in school, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of students have that issue. It's just not. It's a specialty that's very difficult. For physicians, it is a subspecialty, right?
Yeah.
it's a subspecialty to be an OBGYN anesthesiologist. Like you really got to, know that role. Like you to be proficient, you really got to know it, and you've got to spend a lot of time up in that arena. But as the CRNA, you're a full service provider. Our boards test our knowledge and our ability to understand and be able to deal with those patients in that population. So we need to know that information well to be board certified, right? But anyway, fast forward to the case itself. Throughout the whole case, I focused on what I knew and what I was capable of at that time. Meaning, like, we had to do massive transfusion protocol. Obviously I put in the airway, but it was a rapid sequence airway. I had to go through that algorithm and that differential of seeing the patient, seeing that she's white as rice. Like she's anemic. It's a crash. It's problems. She's crying. It's a lot going on. The attending OB, surgeon is cursing and screaming, get the patient in the effing room, and so on and so forth. We need to get this going, and I know that if I'm not doing what I have to do, this patient potentially could expire. It's a lot going on in my mind. Everyone's got their eyes wide open. Everyone's, hair standing up. Things were pretty intense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't let the patient see my terror. I can't even let my attending see my terror. I can't let the other people around the room see the terror. So as the anesthesia group, the three of us are in the room. We're hustling. The surgery team is hustling. The OR staff is hustling. Everyone's hustling to pretty much keep this patient alive and keep the patient going. So, of course, we go through the case. We get through everything. We take care of her. And, thank God she made it. Everything, happened. And, so it was a good end to that story. But the real good end for me was that after it was all said and done, the way that my attending reacted, the way the other CRNA reacted and kind of said, in the debrief was kind of like, Cliff, you did a great job. We know this is overwhelming for you. There's a bit above your head. When you're a new grad, it's overwhelming. You want to be, you want to kind of just take care of the ASA 1s and 2s, the lab chole, the 23-year-old, 15, 20 kilos. You know what I'm trying to say? Like the easy patient.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's
The
the
bread and butter
one-to-one.
with ASA ones. Yeah.
Yeah, the one-to-one supervision. Like that's the kind of like the scenario that you're supposed to have, like that first 3 to 4 months, 6 months out of school. That's kind of like the ideal situation, right? But again, you're not going to get ideal if you decide to push yourself and say, I'm going to be called CRNA, I'm going to take a job, I'm going to, work. It is what it is. So I said to myself, I'm working. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the direction that I had to go. It wasn't like I'm working, I'm going to shit myself because I have a case. I had to take it. I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for some context, you guys, is a CREDA is essentially this is an OB patient. So this woman is not only pregnant, she's bleeding because that's one of the big complications with placenta accreta. So she's literally bleeding. She's pregnant. Pregnant women are also known to have difficult airways. So from top to bottom, you've got basically the recipe for a disaster. So thank God that she is okay. And I just want to say, like, obviously you guys have heard his whole story there. He was still able to manage that. And that is really what the job is. The job is being able to take your unique skill set, being able to command the room, being able to be scared, but still being able to know this is what I do know. Going back to that foundational knowledge, going back to the work you did in school, and then being able to apply that. And that is why getting into CRNA school is hard. It can be difficult at times and challenging. That's why CRNA school is challenging. It's all for a reason. And obviously he went through a lot of difficulties in his cardiothoracic job, right? So all of that to all come into fruition, after taking time off and getting his health together and prioritizing him. But he did all of that also, which I guess I don't want to assume for you, but to be able to be a good caretaker for his patients as well. Like he's set himself up for not only this life that he has now, but also to be a really good provider. And so I would just want y'all to hear that and know that. And remember, like when school gets tough and when things get tough, it's these moments that happen when you are the CRNA that, number one, make everything you go through kind of all worth it. But it makes your hard work and your resiliency really like shine through. So I think that's excellent. So we're gonna wrap up here, in just a few minutes. But talk to me about like now that you're married, you're living in New York, you're working, you're still on your weight loss journey. What is kind of like what's next for you? Like what is going to happen in your next season? What are you focused on right now? What really matters? Like talk to me about kind of your next chapter.
So I used that expression earlier, like it's cliche, but definitely making up for lost time. Meaning that with my free time, my downtime, definitely to make it up to my wife, make it up to my siblings, make it up to my family, my extended family, my parents. Really, really focus on doing other things. Even this alone, like podcasting and doing some of these activities, is time away from family. Mentoring is time away from family. That's why, just to kind of tap on this really quick,
Yeah.
I had to tell somebody the other day, I'm not necessarily like happy or comfortable having to start charging people for my time as a mentor. And there's a controversy in that too. It's like, oh, some people say, oh, why don't you just do something altruistic and nice and give back and put the ladder down, let people come up. I'm all for that. That's my foundation. That's my baseline. But I've realized that, and unfortunately in this, you'll get a lot of people who give you feeler type of phone calls. They'll spend 2 hours on the phone with you, feeling you out, feeling out the field, and it ends up being a little bit gossipy too. And it's like it's not efficient, and you're also wasting a lot of time not and away from your own family and the people that really are your people in your life. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? There's a lot of CRNAs who have a wealth of knowledge, and they keep quiet and they focus on their family. You know what I mean? And they don't put themselves out there at all. You know what I mean? There are a lot of my friends, they can do what I'm doing right now, and they choose not to. In their mind, it's not important, it's not a priority, it's not part of their goal or their mission in their career. They go to work, they go home, and home is home. There's
Yeah.
nothing else about work once they leave that hospital or that facility.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a different mentality. Me, I get asked all the time anyway, at work, after work, and so on and so forth. And I also put myself out there. You know what I mean? It's just
Hmm.
something that's part of my personality. It's something I want to do. I see what you're doing. I love it. And I also
Thank
see that
you.
there's also an area for me to help you, almost like subspecialize. There's not a lot of male CRNAs out there. There are not a lot of black male CRNAs out there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We make up such an extremely small population of the entire anesthesia community. Like so small, people would like be like to imagine how small that number is. So anyway, I'm saying all that to say that I don't mind and I'm willing to put myself out there to be a resource for men who are in that boat, because there are nuanced conversations that I can have with a man like that you cannot have, Amanda. A lot of people can't have those conversations, unfortunately and fortunately for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's why I will just go to say really quickly is everybody has something of value to bring. You know what I mean? Nobody, like, I love doing this. I love the mentoring. I love the coaching. My business has really obviously evolved. But, Cliff has something different to offer. There's so many, the CRNA club, CRNA, all my people, right? Like, there's so many people out there, and it doesn't really matter to me who you come to be, you ask questions, you do whatever, just get the information that you're looking for. And everybody has, like, you have a, like, once again, you have a niche to fill that I necessarily, I obviously can't, you know what I mean? Like one person can't do everything. So that's why I love that. How can people, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
So I created a professional email I think it was appropriate. I call it cliffcharlesanesthesia@gmail.com. I'm thinking about maybe converting it to the same name I use on my social media, Cliff
I
Notes Anesthesia, but for
Yep.
now, it's cliffcharlesanesthesia@gmail.com.
Perfect. And I
All
will
right.
link all his
I'm gonna
stuff.
create more.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I am creating a link tree and creating like a whole social media presence just to kind of have a landing ground so people know in a professional manner, this is, there's going to be maybe a paywall or something to say, okay, this is the way it's going to be. If you want to have a professional, serious, meaningful conversation and mentorship with me because of one reason or another, this is the way it's going to be. You know what I mean? Like, I love to play the game of, call me anytime. We can have a little talk about this anesthesia thing and this and that. That would be great. But there's a lot of reasons I have to sit and think about why I have to create a paywall. I have to create a professional profile of a mentorship, a professional situation to protect me and to protect people and have a level of privacy and a level of respect for not only myself but also the profession and what the person needs to do to be qualified, if not overqualified, for a seat in an anesthesia training program.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's kind of my whole platform, and my thing is helping create the next leaders like in the profession is, the big thing that I'm into. So I have one more question to ask you. Was it worth it, and would you do it again? The whole thing.
Yes, the reason why I say it's worth it and I would do it again is because I said earlier, I learned a lot about myself, and there's a lot of things that I don't think I would be in the position I am today as a person if I didn't go through this journey. And I do believe that in order to get to this adulthood thing and to adult a certain way and to enjoy and appreciate certain riches in life, this level of hardship is required. You know what I mean? Like, you have to have a high level of hardship. You're going to have to make some big ass sacrifices to do something like this. But I do think the rewards on the other side of those sacrifices are much greater. They taste better. They feel better. The way that the world deals with you when you go through these hardships is different. There are a lot of podcasts out there that talk about this whole thing of trust fund versus people who work for what they get. There's only a small amount of Americans and people in the world that get money through some kind of endowment or inheritance, or that just falls into their lap, or windfall, right? And typically when people get money in that fashion, it's not appreciated. They didn't really go through the mud to get it. So their life doesn't really show for a great life because of that. But when you meet people who were on their purpose, who were on their ish through their journey, they have a tendency to convey that in the way that they move. You can just tell when you come across somebody who's been through something, you can see it in the way that they operate. You know what I mean? You can tell they're no nonsense. You can tell that there's somebody that means something. But when you see somebody who got something without the effort, it's pretty clear that, they didn't even have to do anything to get what they get. And it's not the same. You don't get the same energy from that person. That person doesn't have a story. They don't really have much to offer to any conversation. They don't have a wealth of knowledge. They don't have any life experience. There's nothing to really, there's no depth. There's no culture. There's no nothing when you come across somebody who was handed everything. You understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying I was not handed certain things, but I took advantage of a lot of opportunities that were given to me. And I had hardships that kind of, in combination, everything molded me to be who I am. So yes, there were things that were handed to me. There were things that were not handed to me. No one else had to sit and take that board exam. No one else had to sit in that clinical and be my hands to intubate that patient. No one else had to be me holding that spinal needle or the epidural needle. No one else had to do that. You understand what I'm saying? Those are the things that I can do. But in the process of going through school and so on and so forth, I had to network. I seeked mentors. I spoke to you. I spoke to other people. I spoke to Lena from Diversity. I spoke to all the connections I made with the people at Diversity. The hard conversations I had with those people. Some of those people yelling at me. Some of those people dealing with me, and me dealing with them. Those conversations, those interactions, those things that were happening in those quiet rooms. The study rooms that I had. Those study sessions I had with my classmates. All those experiences, all of that in combination really is, important. And I think at the end of the day, yes, it was worth all of that, because all that stuff, all those memories, all of that experience is making me who I am. And I continue to have a lot of those same experiences now. It's not like a journey that just ends the minute that you pass your boards and hold that paper that says pass. It continues. It continues throughout your entire life, really, right? And this is something I signed up for. I knew I signed up for it because I was above the age of 18. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I consented to all of this.
Yeah.
There's so many documents I consented to along the way where I said to her, I could have quit at every single moment that some challenge came and faced me and slapped me in the face. A lot of us can sit there and go, oh, this is a challenge? You know what? I'm out. That's a challenge? I'm out.
Yeah.
Same thing as my wife. Every challenge that we face as a couple, she could have easily walked out and said, you know what? F this. I'm
Yeah.
out. Cliff, I don't want this. I'm out. I don't want that. I'm out. She could have easily said that at any time, and she didn't. And that's why she's still here.
Yeah. I love it. I
You
love
understand
it.
what I'm saying?
I love it. Yes, absolutely. Well, Cliff, I think like mic drop right there. I love that. Like you shared so much. I know my audience is so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for your time. And I'm so glad that we connected. It has been literally a joy to watch you from 2020 until now. And, you know, I'm always in your corner cheering you on. And everybody go follow him, check him out. If you have any questions or anything, check out our live. I'm going to link all of Cliff's stuff. I'm going to link our live, everything in the show notes. Thank you once again for your time. I know people have furiously taking notes. I know you guys are this is like literally an episode to re-listen to again. There's so much good stuff here. And I just can't thank you enough, Cliff. So thank you. And I will talk to y'all soon. And I will see you all on the next episode.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your time as well. Because I know, again, you have even more responsibility. You're a working anesthetist, mother of two, and so on and so forth. To me, I say that to my wife all the time. You know, I'm impressed with a lot of my colleagues. Again, a majority of my colleagues are female. I mean, they say about 50 to 60% of CRNAs are female, right?
Yeah.
Most of them are nurses. Many are the primary breadwinner in their family. Again, that's another whole other conversation.
Yes.
That in terms of that family piece that we can get into in a future episode.
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely
so I look forward to it.
Coming back. Definitely bringing you back. So
yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. So, all right, guys.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you guys soon on the next episode.
All right.